Colloquium had around 200 participants. We had a dozen of guest speakers in 5 sessions. We had around 80 papers and several moments during these 2 days for dialogue among academics and business people and for a kind of multi-stakeholder dialogue.
We have lost 1.5 million jobs in Spain alone. We have lost about 4.6 million jobs in the European Union. We have lost 5 million jobs in the US. And that's the real and painful impact of the Main Street. But the Wall Street perspective is equally dramatic. In roughly the same terms, we moved from a growth pattern of the world economy of 2.5 percentage points to a contraction of approximately minus 2.4%. We have lost $40 trillion in share capital, which is equivalent to 1 year of global GDP. And that's when we talk about none of us has ever experienced a crisis like this. The government stimulus programs were certainly a major part who helped us to stabilize the very difficult situation around the world. When we just think about that, governments around the world have spent $2 trillion on investment programs. We have started to see the first aspects of the impact in 2009, but for sure there is a significant impact still ahead of us, 2010, 2011, 2012. It was from a corporate governance perspective, a very encouraging sign that also governments around the world moved to a new paradigm and they moved to a new forum. It was no longer just the G8. We were dealing with the crisis in the G20 forum, which is nothing else than the recognition that key emerging markets around the world also play a very important part in terms of what has to be done how the global economy has to be reshaped from a governance as well as economically perspective.
Well, I think you need to make quite a distinction between what has happened on the governance level and what has happened on corporate social responsibility. I think that the crisis in the 90s with the internet bubble, I think that the crisis with the Enrons in the year 2000, I think that now the financial crisis all have led to much more severe regulations and much more severe recommendations on governance. On the contrary, I think that so it has been more fraud and more crisis-driven changes, whereas I think that CSR is much more broad-based changes in society, which have been coming along much more under the pressure of society, of NGOs, of citizens, and it's a much more broader development, which has led, I think, to many, many important changes. I think that in the corporate social responsibility, much has been done as well at the level of economic research, teaching, as it has been in the companies themselves, at the level of reporting, at the level of communication, at the level of listening to stakeholders and informing stakeholders about what a firm is doing. However, I think that we still have a big gap to cover in how it's in practice really implemented in the day-to-day life, in the big decision-making, as well as in the small decision-making.
New is the notion that companies have a role in society. I mean, old was companies have a role in the economy, and that was about creating value and innovation, bringing new products and services to the market. But there has been a growing set of expectations to companies, and I think it began from a negative perspective that companies were seen as, having negative impacts on the environment and on society, and that they needed to reduce that negative impact. There was a call for business to make also a positive role, so not only to reduce the negative impacts, but to have positive impacts. And so that has been a change that has been manifested, I would say, in the last 5 years, where the talk has been about shared value. How can companies contribute to issues in society? A lot of businesses have been living up to that. Information technology business on how they, can bridge the IT gap, but also how they contribute to to lifelong learning and a literal digital literacy development in Africa and so on, and what computers can bring to revolutionize people's lives and so on. In healthcare, and Johnson & Johnson has been one of the companies that has been very active in looking at positive ways in which their business can contribute to solving societal problems. Other companies like IBM, but also Shell, and not in the least Unilever, which is in the food and agricultural business, have been focusing from the one hand, which was reducing negative impacts, to enhancing positive impacts.
What have we learned from the crisis? And the aspects is actually very simple. Short-term gains do not create long-term value. To avoid the mistakes, I would like to put in front of you my definition of a sustainable economic system. And my definition of the sustainable economic system is actually a contract between generations, where there must be a certain balance between economy, ecology, and social responsibility. And how do we tackle the two main areas of social responsibility? The first action area is the immigration of skilled workers. Even if we massively ramp up our efforts to provide education to future generations, our demand for skilled workers in Europe cannot be met. And this is because the European population, ladies and gentlemen, is shrinking. In 10 years, Europe will need an addition of 20 million skilled workers. By 2050, it will be 50 million skilled workers. Currently, only 5% of immigrants to the European Union are skilled workers. The second area of action is the agenda of social responsibility and the aid to developing countries. Such aid is not just humanitarian, it is also wise. Today, the European Union already finds itself under considerable pressure from illegal immigrants. We need to help people to find the higher standard of living in their own country. I would like to start with the key 4 megatrends that are reshaping our world. And let me first of all start with the demographic change. We are currently having around almost 7 billion inhabitants on our planet. This will be increased according to the United Nations projects by mid-century to roughly 9 billion. It will mainly driven by increased life expectancy. And of course, this has a profound impact when we talk about the social security, the pension systems around the world. We just remember that probably less people are paying into our social system than we have actually people who would like to live from their benefits going forward. The second megatrend is urbanization, and 2007 was the first year in the world where more than half of the global population actually is living in cities. The third megatrend, which is the climate change aspect. Sir Nicholas Stern, the former chief economist of the World Bank, who has actually calculated if we don't do anything about it, that we will potentially lose 5% of global GDP annually, which is twice the impact of the current economic crisis every year. The fourth trend is globalization. Ladies and gentlemen, it has become fashionable to blame the globalization aspects of the current crisis. I am of a different opinion. The key argument against this is actually when you talk about the development of a society like China. Between 1980 and today, China has been able to lift 400 million inhabitants out of poverty. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the true impact of and consequence of the globalization aspects. Nevertheless, we still have roughly 1.4 billion inhabitants on our globe who are living actually in extreme poverty. And that's one of the reasons why we have to resist protectionism aspects which are happening around the world. We see the Buy Local, Buy American and other initiatives. And we need an effective Doha round, and we need a free trade environment around the world.
The next challenge, as a result also of the crisis, is the question of global governance. I mean, we need to stabilize the global economy in ways that are not going to save us from the scares that we've been through in the last 12 months. So, and then everybody looks to regulators and governments, but companies also have to play a role in that, in self-regulation, in industry standards, and in practices that which actually lets them compete, but on the other hand, which saves their eco-environment in which they compete, because otherwise they compete each other to death, and in the end of the day, there's nothing to compete about. The leader of tomorrow is about understanding a much broader context in which he or she does business. So not just the economic context, but also the political, social, environmental, and the global governance context in which business is taking place. The sustainability of the firm is dependent on the sustainability of the business environment. If the business environment collapses, the firm collapses too. So that is context. But then the next thing that comes in is complexity, because if you then take all of that context, then it becomes very complex. And it is very difficult then, because we like simple measures, we like simple principles to act on, because then we don't have to think a lot. But if you introduce a lot of complexity, that makes it very difficult, because you've got conflicting demands, you don't have, you know, simple standards to act to or simple measures to be performing against. That will require leaders to be less fearless, to take more risks, but more of a calculated risk, in the sense not the risk-taking that we've seen with the bankers, that's what I'm talking about. But it's the risk-taking about finding new ways to deal with the complex issues. And the last thing is connectedness, the 3 C's, so context, complexity, connect. The connectedness is to be in touch. That's what connectedness is. And it requires empathy. That means, you know, talking and feeling comfortable to talking with a wide range of people, not just within their own ecosystem, but with NGOs, with people out there, with customers. And it's just not an intellectual, rational connectedness, but it's also an emotional connectedness, the feeling what you're doing. And there might be even a spiritual connectedness, which is about what is ultimately the sense and the purpose of what we're doing here, and how do we preserve the Earth's resources.
The idea that we can sustain a clean separation between a fiduciary understanding of governance and a political understanding of governance, is dangerous rhetoric. Arguably, there never was such a separation, and arguably, we need to consciously overcome such a separation. The rate of growth and significance of state-owned enterprises coming out of China, Russia, and elsewhere, the simply rate of growth of the size of even publicly listed companies that are emerging out of the BRICS and other countries, and the significance of sovereign wealth funds and a whole series of related public investment platforms that governments that are not in Europe or North America are progressing, raises profound questions as to which businesses we need to have in the room, what is their current underlying governance as we speak, and what form of governance we should seek to induce them into participating in if we wish to address these broader issues.
Can the blind lead the blind? And that is not meant to be provocative, but it's just to underline that companies and business schools are both facing the same problems. Because also a business school is a business. And there's lots of forces of inertia and conservative forces that hold business schools and companies back from change, right? Because, you know, there's only one status quo, and the status quo always gives security, certainty, and familiarity. Both know, companies and business schools, that they have to change. Some do recognize it and act on. What can they learn from each other? Well, they need to engage in combined change, because business schools and companies actually also collude in that they can reinforce their own prejudices, which are about status quo and no change. but they can also collude in actually making change happening. And that is about sustainability and responsibility.
I think that first, we business schools are not the only providers of training of managers. So that this means that we share our responsibility with many others. Especially, I would say, with the basic disciplines, the basic sciences, like economics or political science or psychology or sociology, we receive their influence and their ideas. So that it is very difficult for a business school to fight against this common knowledge of the subject. And nevertheless, there has been a lot of business schools that have played a very positive role on this. We try to be, for example, a responsible business school, trying to tell our students and the participants in our programs that we are not only here for getting money, for being rich. We try also to promote values, capacities, the sense of cooperation. This is the moment in which many changes that were, so to say, formal or theoretical should jump to be practical and to be applied really in the business world. I mean, in the past, many business schools, for example, taught courses on business ethics, on corporate social responsibility, business society, and all of this. No? But sometimes this was created something like a complement to other courses, not something that is the core of the teaching, of the management profession. So that I think we are now in facing this challenge, the challenge of making the whole of our activity converge to these values and to this broader point of view of the management profession. I think the EABIS annual conference of this year has contributed a lot to enlarging the field of business in society and of corporate governance. The idea of the governance was in the past limited to corporate governance from one side and the governance of the polity from the other side. Now we realize that both are related and the field is much broader than this one. Companies have duties towards its shareholders, of course, but also many other stakeholders. But now we consider that companies are also responsible of the governance of other stakeholders external, like, for example, governments, NGOs, and media institutions. This means that we are in front of a number of crossed competences or cross responsibilities. Governments are responsible of the good governance of companies and of NGOs and civil society. Civil society and NGOs are also responsible of the governance of the others, and especially the companies are responsible of the good governance of the governments, and this means an interrelationship that has been ignored in the past.
I would say that in the next years of CSR debate, we will see three different movements. One movement is a movement of centrality, which means in these last years we have seen the debate of CSR more in terms of philanthropy sometimes, and there is now a tendency towards mainstreaming CSR. This is going to be also interesting because it's a debate between the more European approach and the more American approach, so to say. A second movement is a movement of radicality. In the last years, CSR has been, or the debate on CSR has been based mainly on business and the business case of CSR. Once we have already achieved the legitimacy of this business case, now I think it's the moment of going deep on the reasons of CSR into what is called the moral case or the ethical and the values behind the CSR. And the third movement, I think, is the movement of complexity. Business is not the only agent that has to care about social responsibility. We see a lot of complex problems in our societies, and business are not the only agent that need to think about and solve these problems. So part of the CSR movement is also going to think about what's the role of business in society, but also what's the role of other agents.